The judge in the January 6th case should be disbarred, according to our special guest, Andrea Widburg. Welcome to Saving America, and this is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Andrea Widburg is deputy editor of The American Thinker, a pro-American publication with interesting and important articles. Many of those articles are written by Andrea, and I'm a big fan of her work, even though she earned her BA from Berkeley. She, however, also earned her JD from the University of Texas Law School. And we welcome her back for a second appearance. Welcome, Andrea.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be back. I enjoyed my first appearance very much, and thank you for all the nice things you said. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Well, let's jump in for our 3 questions for today. And the first one, share with our audience a little bit about what's happening with these January 6th defendants. And I think everybody knows this was the crazy nonsense that happened at the Capitol building on January 6th.
Okay, very briefly, if you really want to know, do a Google or not Google, I don't do Google anymore, a Quant or a Bing search for Julie Kelly, because she has been sticking on this like a Gila monster, not letting go. She's wonderful. I just looked up the data. At least 820 people were charged with the Capitol insurrection. And it's worth considering that in 2020, American cities burned from one end to another. And most people, even if they were arrested, ended up not being charged, despite attacking federal buildings, burning billions of dollars of property. None of that went anywhere. Most of these people are still languishing in prison, and most of them are up on what boils down to trespassing charges. An oath keeper has been charged with something more serious, and one of them just pled guilty, but they are systematically being deprived of all of their civil rights. And to give a little context, if you look at the videos that we have, and mind you, there are 14,000 hours of videos that the Capitol Police refused to release to defendants who should be able to have them to defend themselves. But what we know is that there were at least 20 FBI agents in the crowd. We know that there was coordination pushing people into the Capitol building. We know that literal men in black systematically removed the signage that had been put up around the Capitol saying no trespassing. So people who came late and saw a flow into the Capitol building where the Capitol police officers were often opening the door thought that they were invited into the Capitol. It was like a honey trap. And these people are languishing in prison, many of them. I've taken to calling them the January 6th martyrs, because truly they have been in a martyrdom. They are in prison. One who is not in prison, but whose life was destroyed, committed suicide. The ones in prison are not getting medical care. The cells are filthy. The food is inedible or inadequate. The prison guards are treating them really, really badly. And so it is a martyrdom, and they're not being given bail. And a lot of them haven't really been officially charged with anything. And so these are all violations of their civil rights. Most of them were peaceably assembling because there was no signage by the time they arrived, and the police let them into the Capitol. They were doing what they thought they had a right to do because all evidence to the contrary was missing. The Fifth Amendment, they've been deprived of life, liberty, and property for over a year without due process. The Sixth Amendment, they've been deprived of speedy trials and the right to be informed about the nature and cause of the accusations against them. And this also encompasses that 14,000 hours of video. And the Eighth Amendment, because being denied bail is tantamount to impermissible, excessive bail. And mind you, these people are not violent. They have no history of violence, and they are not being let out of prison. Someone finally filed a writ of habeas corpus petition to be let out of jail because there's no charge against him. So right. That's where it is.
It is a stunning situation in a country that famously argues for equal justice for all. Our second question, I wanted to just read a piece from your recent article on this situation. Judge Reggie Walton explicitly showed his political bias and hostility to Thompson. Walton should have recused himself before trial. So tell our audience a little bit about the actions of Judge Walton that prompted you to make such a strong statement.
Yeah, this really surprised me. And I have to say, when I read this story, I assumed that Reggie Walton was a Clinton or Obama appointee because of what he did and said. And it was quite a shock to learn that he came of age in the judiciary during the Reagan and Bush eras. Mm-hmm. So he is, and I don't know if he's a registered Republican or an independent, but he was elevated to the judiciary under Republican presidents. And this story is badly written, but what I've been able to piece together is that at some point during the trial, the defense played Trump's speech to the jury in this Thompson trial. And Thompson was completely locked down by now. He had been in prison for a year. His family had abandoned him. He's deeply depressed. He was just sitting lump-like in the courtroom. And his counsel was much more friendly with the prosecuting attorneys than he was with his own client. You know, a good defense counsel is solicitous of his client. He shows the jury that the client is a valuable person and that he has a relationship. And this defense attorney, and I don't know if it was a court-appointed attorney, was palling around with the prosecutors. And he was asking questions like, how does it feel to commit a crime? Which is really not a defense attorney question. And at some point in the trial, the defense played Trump's speech, in which Trump, of course, as we know, said, go peaceably to the Capitol and raise your voices, which is what people thought they were doing. But at some point in the trial, and I cannot tell if it was immediately after that evidence was presented or after a verdict had already been reached, but the story is that Judge Walton said, anyone who follows Trump is weak-minded. Thompson is a flight risk. He also said Trump is a charlatan who caused an insurgency. He is tearing America apart. That's the reason why our country is falling apart. I am proud of the jury for doing this. Now, even if he said that at the end of the trial after a verdict, that's completely irrelevant in terms of his obligations as a judge. It was such a manifest sign of his particular bias. If it was during the trial, I mean, that was the end of the trial, a total mistrial, judge recused, judge whatever. But even if it was at the end of the trial process has not ended yet. I mean, the process gives a right to appeal. There may be a retrial, although usually if you get a retrial, you're going to kick out the judge anyway. But also, there are 850 defendants out there. Judge Walton has just advertised like a peacock. He's fluffed his tail and said, I hate Trump and I hate all Trump supporters, and I believe they deserve to be punished because they are weak, stupid, and dangerous people.
Yeah, that seems like a bad trail for a judge. And of course, in past generations, it was very, very important for judges to be non-political. And we seem to have abandoned that very important concept. And of course, we recently had a Supreme Court appointee who only had one particular characteristic. And I have a real problem with that. I think we should be saying, this is the 9 best lawyers in the country, not, well, we've got one who has to meet this standard, which is not that they're a great lawyer. So, but what are the legal standards, as you understand them, for these judges in terms of recusing themselves and in terms of expressing their opinions?
Well, there is, if you are a federal judge, there is a code of conduct for United States judges. And the applicable parts where a judge should avoid the appearance of impropriety, as well as, a judge should avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all activities. Well, so even impropriety means wrongdoing, appearance means appearing to do wrong. And even if he was able to conduct the trial in a balanced fashion where he made the correct rulings, The fact that he has revealed himself, that this judge has revealed himself to be a rabid partisan. He's obviously a never Trumper, up there with Jennifer Rubin and David French. It's deeply concerning because now we know that sitting on that court, no person appearing before him who supports Donald Trump can get a fair trial because he looks like he's guilty of impropriety. He should perform the duties of the office fairly, impartially, and diligently. And one of the things this means is a judge should not make public comment on the merits of a matter pending or impending in any court. And again, even if the jury had reached a verdict in this case, matters pending, because there are over 800 defendants, this defendant would not be the only one. So that was, again, a failure of impartiality. And if he cannot be impartial, the judge himself has an obligation to disqualify himself from proceedings. And I've worked on cases where judges have done that because sometimes they have a financial benefit, or sometimes they have a personal relationship with someone involved in the case, and they were required to withdraw or recuse themselves. And the same is true when they have a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party. Well, if this judge hates Trump and all Trump supporters, he should have pulled himself out of the case on day one. So he basically outed himself as impartial in a way that could not be remediated, no matter how carefully he tried to conduct the trial. And then what was the last one? That was really the biggie. A judge should refrain from political activity. The fact that he made statements from the bench about a political a president and someone who may again be president, and about people who are invested in that political candidate, means he was conducting a form of political activity. So across the board, this judge did wrong. And the problem is that it's not clear that, I'm terrible at names, that the defendant will have the ability, the emotional capacity, or the financial ability to challenge a case in which a judge was clearly inappropriate.
Right. Well, I don't deal with criminal law, but I've had civil situations. I work in the employment law area from time to time, and I've had a couple clients who got tagged by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, for very minor things. They surveying company had a field crew, and they were more than a mile from a hospital. And apparently, there's some arcane rule that says that if you're more than a mile from a hospital or some distance like that, you have to have at least one person on the surveying crew who's been trained in emergency first aid. And I said to my client, I said, this is just silliness. And they said, you know what? The fine's only $500. We're going to go ahead and pay the fine because we can't afford to fight about it for what the fine is.
Exactly.
So, a lot of my small business clients, unfortunately, have rolled over rather than incur the cost, and of course the uncertainty of, even if they spend the money to fight about it, if they'll be successful. And I think that's what, unfortunately, we're seeing with some of the January 6th defendants, is that I've seen reports of a number of guilty pleas. And I don't think these people are guilty. And when they talk about their backgrounds, most of them have absolutely no prior criminal record. And it's just rather stunning, but indeed a very unfortunate phase in the history of the United States, sadly. Well, Andrea, our time is running short. Tell our audience how they can get more information about you.
I write and edit at americanthinker.com. So it's a very simple name, and it is a fairly unique conservative site in that it doesn't just have a stable of regular writers. We encourage people to send submissions. They can find the rules for it under one of the tabs. Look for contact information, and then the submissions are edited. They go through an editing process, so they have to meet a certain metric in terms of content and quality. And so our site, American Thinker, has an exceptional depth and breadth of knowledge because we have contributors mostly from America, but from all over the world. And it is the ultimate crowdsourcing conservative site that's run through editors so that it has a consistency of quality.
Thank you so much, Andrea Widburg, for being our guest today. This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining us on Saving America. And please, if you've enjoyed today, subscribe on your favorite platform.